This meeting is being recorded from here on. Okay. So right, it's worth always starting a Father's Day sermon, I think, by recognizing that it's a bit of an ambivalent day today. That it's, for those of you who had good fathers, it's a day of rejoicing and celebration. Of those of you who didn't, it's a much more difficult day. And for those of you who are struggling to figure out what it means to be a dad, right? And at the same time, while we celebrate Father's Day and this ideal of fatherhood, we are, many of us, in doing the work of trying to dismantle toxic patriarchy. So how do you celebrate Father's Day and dismantle toxic patriarchy at the same time? Not a small thing. Thank you, Axel. Right.
Wes, could you move the screen? Move your camera so we can see your face.
You move my camera. Oh, my face. I can't see my face either. Can you see my face now?
Yeah. Yes.
There we go. Thank you. Right. So this, for those of you watching from Virginia, yeah, this is the way tech goes, right? So anyway, right, part of my job, but part of just my personality is to say that whatever this thing is we're facing, we can probably find the answer somewhere in Jesus. That doesn't surprise anybody here. So let's go back to the story of Jesus and see if we can learn some things about both dismantling patriarchy and celebrating Father's Day. Jesus, of course, wasn't a father as far as we know. So, it's not direct, but we'll get there. For me, so much of this story is about the ordinariness of Jesus, right? That in some ways, of course, this is Jesus doing the big miracle, but Jesus, the character, appears very sort of plain here. Prior to this, so we're working our way through the Gospel of Matthew, and prior to this, in the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus has mostly been healing folks and calling disciples, right? And the purpose of that, I knew I had one of these around somewhere. The purpose of that is found in Mark chapter 3, verses 13 to 15. This is why he's doing what he's doing, right? Jesus went up to the hills and called to him those he wanted, and they came to him. He appointed 12, designated them apostles, that, here's what they're doing, that they might be with him, and that he might send them out to preach and to have authority to drive out demons. That's what he's trying to do, right? He's trying to do this teaching thing, right? And also the healing and driving out demons things. Now, until this point, Jesus has been doing fairly typical rabbi stuff. This is things that people at least wanted from their rabbis, if not expected. That healing was part of the job. For the pastors that I taught in Ghana, healing was part of their job, and preaching, right, and teaching and bringing in disciples and starting up the next generation of leaders, all just part of the job, right? And so, and the healing, part of the healing, the purpose of healing was, of course, healing, and part of it was to demonstrate Jesus' authority. That, why should you listen to him? Well, look, he can heal. Probably means he has a better connection to God than the rest of us. Right? So all of this is part of the rabbi thing. And so Jesus starts to teach, but then he teaches in these parables, in these odd little stories about something he's calling the reign of God, this mysterious something that's out there and in here and coming and already present and inside of us, and all of these things, right? Sort of Jesus' picture of the way the world should, could, would be, is, if God's will would be done. So until this point in the story, Jesus' disciples know that he has a message and that he can heal. But this story is this story, Jesus does something new. Right? This is Jesus' first sort of nature miracle. This is Jesus' demonstration of larger power. And we can see that the disciples, right, aren't sure yet. Right? They don't know about this. Right? And Jesus is sleeping in the boat, and they're pretty sure he should be doing something, whether it's rowing or, bailing, right? Like, what do they expect? We have no idea. They say, "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" Right? Grab a bucket, maybe. you know, but Jesus just sort of stands up and goes, shush, and then it does, right? And there's no, like, he doesn't stand up and reach toward the heaven and then there's power crackling off his fingers, right? It's very just, yeah, quiet, and then it does. And he looks at his disciples and he goes, what? Right? It's all very calm. It's all very plain. One of the ways that I think these stories through is I try to imagine the movie. Right? If I was the director and I was trying to do this in a film, right? And we want to think beyond sort of typical Jesus movies, right? I mean, typical Jesus movies, the guys all have long hair, they're wearing dresses and they talk in British accents, right? We don't want to do that. So let's do something, you know, like anime or Marvel, right? Let's do the Marvel, let's put this in the Marvel universe. Now, you know, Deb and I have been sort of working our way through a lot of the Marvel Universe stuff recently, and I realize that not all of you do. But I thought I'd ask somebody who knows more. So I emailed Philip and I said, Philip, you know, if this story was in the Marvel Universe, like which Marvel character would you have played Jesus? Which Marvel character is Jesus the most like here? And he suggested Wolverine. Right now, I realize not all of you know your Marvel Universe well, so I asked Scott to find a picture of Wolverine. You got that for us, Scott? Right, there's Wolverine. Okay, in full, that looks like X-Men Wolverine rather than movie Wolverine. Is that right, Scott?
I obviously don't know my Marvel stuff either.
Oh,
So
okay.
I just looked up Wolverine Marvel and picked a picture.
Okay, well, there we go. That's why I didn't recognize it, because I'm going, yeah, that doesn't look like him.
Okay, sorry about that.
Yeah, it's Hugh Jackman, right? But anyway, right, you get the idea, right? And this is what Philip said. Philip said, right, that Wolverine is sort of stern and he's short, and like Jesus is sort of, you know, like we don't know his tone of voice, right, when he's talking to his disciples, but he doesn't have a lot to say. He's really brief in a lot of his things, right? But Wolverine is also compassionate and caring, right? He's both incredibly human and, of course, you know, superhero at the same time. So this was Philip's idea. This would be the fake character he would choose. And Wolverine's also a superhero whose powers aren't apparent when he's not using them, right? So for those of you who are lost here, Wolverine's got these monstrous claws that come out of his arm. They're made of adamantium, which, you know, might be a play on adamant or might be a play on Adam, right? On Adam, who knows, right? But anyway, right? But most of the time they're back in his arm. And so you can't see them. So he's just sort of an ordinary guy. And then all of a sudden something happens and whoosh, out come the claws, right? And in some ways, Jesus is like that he's just sort of this ordinary guy. And then he says, quiet to the wind, and it does. And that's a bit of a surprise. Okay, so there you go, right? But, and here's where, you know, any analogy is going to break down, right? Because the reality is that if you're faced with a storm, you know, the claws aren't going to do much good, right? That having big, you know, metal claws coming out of your arm isn't very useful most of the time, right? I mean, you know.
He's also invincible and immortal.
Yeah, well, that helps too. Right. He's also invincible and immortal, right? Which certainly helps, right? But again, right, doesn't help anybody else in the boat, right? I mean, he can just like go to the bottom of the sea and walk home, right? But the rest of the people in the boat are going to go to the bottom of the sea and not walk home, right? And he can like stab the lightning with his claws, but so what? Right. Anyway, right. And interestingly enough, what Philip didn't choose was there is an actual Marvel character called Storm, who's a African princess, right? And she could have just also gone shush, and that would have happened. So anyway, you know, an interesting choice on his part, right? But what is to me most interesting about all of this is that none of the Marvel characters can share their powers. That in the Marvel universe, there are the superheroes, and then there's the rest of us, And the superheroes do superhero-y things, and the rest of us run away screaming or die. Those are sort of our two options. That's fair, yeah? Yeah, I think so, right? But sharing power is Jesus' main purpose. Like in our verses that we read, Jesus goes up, he calls disciples to him, and the first thing he does is send them out with power. Not send them out and say, well, good luck with this, right? But he gave them authority over evil spirits. He gave them authority over, oh, by the way, he says, go out and cast out evil spirits. Right? And again, for those of you who don't have a modern equivalent of this and you're trying to figure out what this has to do with anything, and I always often think about mental illness as a similar sort of thing. My wife disagrees, but that's okay. Right? What does she know? Right? Because, I mean, depression is this little voice inside of you that goes, you're not good enough, you're bad, right? And so many mental illness is just this little voice inside, not just, it is this little voice inside of you that's constantly saying evil things. And it'd be nice just to get rid of that voice, wouldn't it? Right? The anxiety that says, oh, you got to do more. Oh, there's more. Oh, there's more. Oh, don't. Right? And if you could get rid of that voice. Yeah. Right? Anyway. And Jesus, how do we think about these things? Because, you know, like makes such good stories, and then I can't. Right? I mean, I'd love to be able to go out there into this congregation and just sort of get rid of all of the evil spirits of depression and anxiety and right sadness and loneliness and loss, and just poof, they'd be gone. But right, still we are given something. It'd be so much easier, of course, to do a film of David. Right, the David story you read, that'd make a really easy film, right? You could pick your superhero there, the battles there, and they're bloody and they're direct, and you got, you know, Goliath's head there, right? So that'd make a great sort of visual kind of scene, right? And the women are doing their part. They're coming out and going, oh, David, you have such big muscles. Go, David, right? So they have their role. And you've got court intrigue going on. You got the bad old king, and then you've got David, who's got he's the new king in waiting, secret king in waiting. And you've got this friendship going on between the old king's son. So there's a little, you know, how's that going to work out? And then later on, you're going to have a marriage between the old king's daughter and David. So it gets even more complicated with the family stuff, right? So it's a nice, easy movie. And Jesus just sort of takes this whole paradigm and throws it on its head and says, no, I'm not going to be that kind of hero. I'm not going to be the flashy one. I'm not going to be the king who's sitting on his throne. I'm just going to be me. And I'm going to do miracles that most people aren't even going to notice. Right? The people in Rome had no idea that Jesus was doing miracles, and the people in China had no idea that Jesus was doing miracles, and the people in Africa, right, no idea. Just these quiet little things his disciples kind of noticed. Right? And it's really important, I think, to remember how quiet this all started, because we're moving back into a time when quiet is the way it's going to go again. One of the things that I do to try to help myself sleep at night is to listen to a history podcast, because that, in my opinion, is the purpose of history, is to help people fall asleep. So I listened to a podcast called The History of Byzantium, and the narrator of The History of Byzantium talks about Constantine. And Constantine, of course, was the emperor who made Christianity the official religion of the Roman Empire. And he understood that as a failure in some significant ways, not because Constantine didn't do that, but because Constantine transformed Christianity from a religion from below, of just ordinary folks, of slaves and women and the poor, and a group that was focused on these people, to suddenly, right? A group that was focused on power and might and authority and, right, and became a hierarchy, and the people above told the people below what they were supposed to believe and do and think, right? And this was a, entirely secular historian who goes, yeah, this was a horrible thing for the church. Right? But all of this, right? All of this affects our picture of maleness. It affects our picture of what it means to be a father. So I've sort of condensed it to 3 possible messages for a father. The typical hero message for the father is, I can do this, right? So we guys, we can do stuff, right? If the women don't find you handsome, they should at least find you handy, right? To quote Red Green. And so we can fix this and we can do these things, and right, and then our kids learn to go, oh, daddy, you know so many things, right? And this is the male picture the picture of maleness and fatherhood we get from the Marvel universe, or from, let's face it, much of Western culture. The other picture, the second picture of fatherhood, is sort of the opposite. It's the you can do this picture of fatherhood, right? So you encourage the children and you encourage others to say, oh yeah, you can do this, you got this, right? And it's a big improvement. It's a big step forward to be able to take, this power of being able to do stuff, and you just hand it off. And you say, yes, you can do this. You can become independent. You can learn to do your own stuff. And like I said, that's a big step forward. But I don't think that's where we want to go. I think the ultimate message we want to get to is, we can do this together. That should be the message of fatherhood. And those of you who do this know how terribly inefficient that is. There are so many jobs where it's just so much easier to do it yourself. And there are so many jobs where, well, yeah, the kid can probably handle this, right? You go do that, and then I'll go do something else, and we'll get twice as many things done. And if you screw up, I'll come back and finish it later, right? But you do your thing, I'll do mine, right? And you get that message. But we can do this together is just going to take time, right? Because the kid is going to get lots of things wrong, and they're going to get distracted, and then they're going to do this over here, and then they're going to run away, and then I'm going to have to fix what they did, and then I'm going to have to get them back, and they're going to ask a million questions, half of which I don't know the answer to, and it's really bad, and it has, and then suddenly you get why is the sky blue in the middle? You get why is the sky blue in the middle of trying to do something practical. And that's hard. And that's what creates community. And that's what creates interdependence. And that's what creates people of God, right? And the worst thing is that you do this whole, we can do this thing together, and what do the kids want afterwards? More. Because they like to spend time with you, right? They're going to want more of this. And you don't have time for this, right? So it's much easier to do the first two. And I think Jesus went through that same transition. That Jesus started out going, well, I can heal and I can teach. We got this. And then he went very quickly to sending out his disciples. You can do this, right? And so you do your thing over there and I'll do my thing over here. We'll do the independent thing. But in the end, Jesus got to, we can do this together. Right? I will send you the Spirit. Lo, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. Right? Not you can do this by yourself, but we can do this together. Somehow at the end, God prefers time-consuming and inefficient. Right? Which is really annoying in a lot of ways. It'd be nice if God, lots of days, it'd be nice if God just came and fixed stuff. Doesn't happen. So we are stuck, I think, with a God who prefers the time-consuming and inefficient. And if this is God's way, then we should probably learn. So that's my Father's Day sermon for today. Hopefully something in there was the word of God.